What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now, I know what you might be thinking. These phones are in completely different price ranges, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G being really an entry-level 5G phone, and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE being more or less a flagship phone. So how is this even a remotely fair comparison? Well, if you're new to 5G phones, or even just smartphones in general, you might be kind of on the fence about whether you want to get something more entry-level and affordable like the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, or if you want to spend a bit more and get something like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE instead. So in this video, we're going to be going over the similarities and differences between the two to help you decide whether it's actually worth it for you to spend the money on something like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, or if a more entry-level phone like the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is good enough for you already. Now, in case you end up wanting to learn more about either phone, definitely check out the description where I will be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting a 6.56-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 411, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. So between the two, when it comes to size and dimensions, they're pretty much the same. Sure, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is a tiny bit larger, but honestly the difference is pretty subtle. That being said though, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE with a 1080p resolution versus only 720p, the display quality here is much better. So if you're going to be watching a lot of videos and stuff where the image quality is a bit more important, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will give you a much better experience. And with the dynamic AMOLED, the colors, brightness, and viewing angles with the S21 FE are going to be quite a bit better. So if you're outside in the sun a lot, for example, the S21 FE is going to be a bit easier to see. So overall, this is really going to depend on what you're doing with your phone. If you're really just using your phone as a phone, doing stuff like web browsing, social media, and you're really not consuming a lot of content where the image quality is really important, then in that case, I feel like the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to be plenty good enough. And even if you are doing something like browsing Instagram or watching the occasional video every now and then, the image quality on this phone is really not bad. But if you're doing that kind of stuff all the time, then again, keep in mind the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has significantly better image quality. And for that kind of activity, this is going to make a big difference. Now for storage, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is getting 128GB. And unfortunately, this phone does not have microSD card expansion. So on one hand, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, first of all, with 64GB, for the average user at least, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, this is at least acceptable. And with the microSD card expansion, if you have a lot of photos and videos, for example, you can always save space by offloading that stuff onto a microSD card, and that will help a bit. But with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, honestly, 128GB is definitely a real good amount of storage. And even without a microSD card, I feel like most people are going to be perfectly fine. And I feel like the advantages of having this much storage definitely outweigh not having a microSD card. So overall, if storage is more important to you, then I would go with the S21 FE. But if it's not, if you're not doing a whole lot on your phone, then the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to be perfectly fine. Now for security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners. With the OnePlus, it's right here on the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it's in the display. But starting with the OnePlus, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the S21 FE. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So both fingerprint scanners work real well. And again, remember, both phones do have Face Unlock too. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. Now with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 4K in both the rear and front cameras. So in general, when it comes to features, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE definitely has a huge advantage here, having both an ultra wide camera and a telephoto lens, which in case you don't know, can also technically be used like a macro camera. So really with the S21 FE, we get pretty much all the features. Whereas with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, unfortunately, this phone has pretty much nothing besides a regular camera. That being said though, with the OnePlus, the image quality for what it is actually really good. To give you an idea of what it can do, here's a picture taken with the OnePlus Nord N300 N300 5G using portrait mode, and in general, for being from an entry-level phone, I would say this picture is actually really good. The details look nice and sharp, the colors look nice, the lighting is pretty accurate, and overall, I honestly have no complaints. For the average user, if you're taking more casual kinds of pictures for stuff like social media, for example, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is really all you're gonna need. That being said though, here's a picture taken with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, and as you can see, there is quite a difference. With the S21 FE, remember, this is pretty much a flagship phone, so you are gonna get that kind of quality. Sure, it's not gonna be quite as good as an S22 or S23 Ultra, but compared to pretty much any non-flagship phone, the photo quality is gonna be significantly better. Now, for more normal use like social media, I don't really think you necessarily need this level of quality, just because on stuff like Instagram, for example, the quality we get with the OnePlus is gonna be perfectly fine. But of course, in general, if you want the best quality between the two, and maybe you want a bunch of features too, then of course, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be a much better option, especially considering, again, this phone can record 4K videos, whereas unfortunately the OnePlus can't. That being said though, for more casual use, I do think the OnePlus is still going to be perfectly fine. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. So for the overall performance, considering the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is a much higher end device, this phone is going to be quite a bit faster. So if you're going to be on your phone all day doing stuff like high performance mobile gaming, for example, then I would definitely go with the S21 FE, because for that kind of activity, you will get a significantly better experience. On the other hand though, for more average daily use like social media, web browsing, stuff like that, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is honestly going to be perfectly fine, and while this phone is still nowhere near as fast as the S21 FE, for more casual use it still won't feel slow. Now I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both phones, and here are the results I got. So again, between the two, the S21 FE is definitely quite a bit faster, so if you're maybe coming from an older flagship phone already, or like I said before, if you're just going to be on your phone all the time, especially doing more demanding activities, then yeah, I would definitely say the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to feel a lot better to you. But if you're doing more average things like web browsing and social media, and you're really just not going to be on your phone that much, then keep in mind again, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is still not slow by any means, and for those more normal activities, it's still going to be perfectly fine. Now for the battery, this is an area where the OnePlus Nord N300 5G actually has a bit of an advantage. With this phone, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 33 watt fast charging, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone has a 4500 mAh battery that supports 25 watt fast charging. So overall, the battery life we get with the OnePlus is actually really good, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, even though of course, in and of itself, a 4500 mAh battery really isn't small, with this phone in particular, having a dynamic AMOLED display, 120Hz refresh rate, and a really powerful processor, depending on what you're doing with the phone, it's most likely not going to last quite as long as the average phone that has this kind of battery. So overall, if battery life is important to you, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G will have an advantage. In addition to this, again, this phone does have 33 watt fast charging, and not only this, but the OnePlus actually does come with a 33 watt fast charger, so you can take advantage of the fast charging right away. Whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, unfortunately, this phone doesn't even get a wall adapter, so even though it does technically support 25 watt fast charging, you're going to have to get one of those yourself. But in case you do need one, I am linking to my favorite fast charger in the video description, so if you maybe have this phone already and want to get a fast charger, then definitely check that out too. But in general, when it comes to charging, for the most part, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G will have an advantage. But the reason I say for the most part is because with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we actually are getting wireless charging, whereas unfortunately, we're not with the OnePlus. Now, this is no surprise at all, but just keep in mind, wireless charging is a feature mostly just flagship phones typically have, and when it comes to non-flagship phones, the vast majority of them are not going to have wireless charging. But overall, other than that, in pretty much every other way when it comes to the battery, I do still think the OnePlus Nord N300 5G has the main advantages. Now when it comes to software, with the OnePlus, we are getting Android 12, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, for me at least, this phone actually just upgraded to Android 13, so if having the latest version of Android is important to you, then definitely keep in mind, while the OnePlus at least has Android 12, which is not really bad, the software support is not going to be nearly as good on this phone, or really any entry-level phone that's not a Samsung for that matter. Whereas with the S21 FE, this phone not only currently has Android 13, but is also going to get several other major updates in the future. So if having the latest software is important to you, then getting a higher end device like this is probably going to be a good idea. In addition to this, both phones do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, keep in mind you can use it with either phone. But in conclusion, when it comes to which phone is better, clearly here, in pretty much every way except for the battery, and I guess price if you're counting that, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is the better device. But honestly, again, for a lot of people, getting a phone like this is probably not going to make the most sense, because when it comes to a lot of the features, you may or may not end up actually using them. For example, with the display, if you're not going to be watching videos all the time, using social media, and doing things where you really want a nice image quality, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G with a decently large display, a pretty okay image quality, and a nice tall and narrow form factor is honestly going to be perfectly fine for you. In addition to this, for the camera, again, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is significantly better, but the OnePlus Nord N300 5G still does take really good photos for what it is. And if you're not going to be using the ultra-wide camera or telephoto lens, recording 4K videos, or trying to get the absolute best pictures, and you're really just taking a few casual photos every now and then, I do think in that case, the OnePlus is going to be perfectly fine. And same thing for performance. Sure, of course, the S21 FE is going to be quite a bit faster, and if you're going to be doing stuff like heavy mobile gaming, for example, then yeah, in that case, you're going to want as much processing power as you can get. But if you're really more of a light user doing more basic activities, then even though the Samsung is much faster, the OnePlus is probably going to be just fine for you. And then of course, if the battery is really important to you and you don't necessarily care about a whole lot of other features like the software, wireless charging, and stuff like that, then remember, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G does pretty much have a better battery, except for, again, the wireless charging, but I don't know anyone who actually chooses a phone because it has wireless charging. So in general, if you want a phone with a really good battery, but you really don't need a super nice display, a ton of storage, crazy fast performance, or a super high quality camera with a bunch of features, and you really just need something basic that works, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to be a perfectly fine choice. But if you're doing more demanding activities, you'll want a really nice display, a super good camera, maybe you're recording 4K videos and stuff like that, and you're really looking for a more premium device in general, then in that case, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE might be worth the extra money for you. But this concludes my comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Cleepus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.